Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, The Fallen Pages. Today is not a book, it's a poem by a Pakistani poet, Allama Iqbal. So it starts with, the poem's name is Mother's Dream. And it goes like, one night as I slept, I saw this dream, a dream that deepened my restlessness. I saw that I was going somewhere, there was darkness and I could find no path. Every hair of mine trembled with fear. It was impossible to lift my foot because of terror. When gathering some courage, I moved forward. I saw a line of boys standing there. They were dressed in emerald green clothing, and in everyone's hands lamps were burning. They were silent, walking one behind the other. God knows where they were going. While I was lost in this thought, I saw my son among that group. He was behind the others and was not walking quickly. The lamp in his hands was not lit. Recognizing him, I said, "My dear, where have you come, leaving me behind? In separation from you, I remain restless. Every day I string garlands of tears. You cared nothing for us, not even a little. You left us, fine loyalty you showed." When the child saw my anguish and distress, he turned his face away and answered, "My separation makes you weep, but there is no good for me in this. Thinking this is what has happened to it. Your tears have extinguished it." So this was the poem by Allama Iqbal, and I would like to talk about what I think about, because I'm going to relate this to the Great Mother, the concept of Great Mother by Erich Neumann. So a mother says that one night she slept and saw a dream that sounds simple, almost harmless, but this is the kind of simplicity that opens like a trapdoor beneath the soul. The dream is not a random image, it is not merely grief replaying itself in a theater of sleep. It is the unconscious staging a trial, it is the psyche dragging the mother into a place where her sorrow can no longer hide behind the noble name of love. She is walking somewhere, she does not know where. There is darkness, there is no road, her whole body trembles. She is afraid to move, and already before the dead child appears, before the lamps appear, before the final acquisition comes, the poem has given us its first great psychological truth. Grief is a landscape. When a person loses someone deeply loved, the world does not simply continue with one person missing. The world itself changes shape. Roads disappear, light withdraws, direction becomes impossible. The mother does not merely miss her son, she has lost the structure of meaning that her son gave to her life. This is where Carl Jung becomes essential. For Jung, a dream is not nonsense. A dream is symbolic intelligence. It is the unconscious speaking in images, because ordinary language has failed. The conscious mind says, "I am grieving because I love." The unconscious says, "Let me show you what your grief is doing." Actually, the conscious mind says, "My tears are devotion." The unconscious answers with a child carrying an extinguished lamp. That is the genius of the poem. It does not argue, it reveals. The mother moves through darkness and sees a procession of boys. They're dressed in green like emeralds, and every boy carries a burning lamp. The image is beautiful, but it is not soft. It has the atmosphere of a sacred procession. These are not ordinary children running through the street. They are quiet, they are ordered, they move one behind another as if they belong to another law, another realm, another rhythm beyond the noise of ordinary life. In Jungian psychology, the child is one of the most powerful archetypes. The child represents beginning, renewal, future, innocence, and the possibility of transformation. The child appears when the psyche is trying to show us what can still be born, what can still live, what survives the collapse of the conscious world. But here the child archetype is doubled. There is the group of luminous boys moving with their lamps, and then there is the mother's own son behind them, slower than the rest, carrying a lamp that does not burn. That image is the heart of the poem. The boy is not absent, he is there. He is among the others, but he is delayed. He is not moving freely. He belongs to the procession, but something has interrupted his light, his lamp. The mother has entered the dream thinking she is the abandoned one. thinking the child has left her behind, but the dream reverses the charge. It asks a more terrible question. What if she is the one holding him back? This is where Erich Neumann's idea of the Great Mother becomes the key to the whole point. Neumann, building on Jung, understood that the mother archetype is not merely tender, domestic, and sentimental. The Great Mother is vast. She is the womb, and she also the tomb. She is the nourishment, but also engulfment. She is the breast that feeds, the earth that receives the dead, the cave that shelters, and the abyss that swallows. She is not simply good mother or bad mother. She is the total power of motherhood in the mythic form. And because she is total, she contains both love and danger. The poem is about that danger, not the obvious danger of a cruel mother. That would be too easy. This mother is not cruel. She's wounded. She loves her son. She misses him. She cries for him. She carries his absence like a wound that refuses to close. But the poem psychologically is mature enough to show us something many people do not want to admit. Love can become dangerous without becoming hatred. Love can harm while still believing itself pure. Grief can become possessive while still calling itself devotion. The Great Mother in her positive form gives life. She protects the child, she feeds him, she holds him against the terror of the world. But the Great Mother in her negative form refuses separation. She says, you came from me, therefore you belong to me. She says, you cannot leave the field of my emotion. She says, even death does not release you from my claim. That is the hidden violence in the mother's grief. She does not intend it. That is precisely why it is tragic. Her tears are not knives, they are verse, in a way, because they look innocent, they look holy, they look like proof of love. But in the dream, those tears becomes water, and the child's lamp becomes fire. The tears do not heal, they extinguish. The poem gives us the mother's complaint. She sees her son and calls him her life, her soul, her beloved. But almost immediately, she says, in effect, where have you gone, leaving me behind? That is the first crack in the tenderness. Death becomes abandonment. The child who has no power over death is spoken to as if he has committed betrayal. This is emotionally human, but psychologically revealing. When grief is unbearable, the mind often searches for someone to accuse. Accusation gives pain a shape. It is easier to say, you left me, than to say, I could not keep you. It is easier to blame the dead than to face helplessness before morality, God, fate, and the mystery. Jung would see here the movement of a complex. A complex is not just a thought, it is emotionally charged, not inside the psyche, strong enough to behave almost like a second personality. The mother is not simply remembering her son, she is possessed by the grief complex. Her identity has reorganized itself around the loss. She strings garlands of tears every day. That image is beautiful, yes, but beauty can be a mask. A garland is ceremonial, it is ritualistic. Her grief has become a ritual, almost a private religion. And that raises the poem's most uncomfortable question. What is she worshipping? Is she honoring the child's peace? Is she surrendering him to God? Is she transforming grief into prayer, mercy, and remembrance? Or she is worshipping her own wound? That is a harsh question. But the poem is harsh because it is honest. The mother believes that endless crying proves endless love. The child tells her otherwise. He says, in essence, your separation from me makes you weak, but there is no good for me in this. That is the moral center of the poem. Not all grief is useful. Not all pain is sacred. Not every tear becomes prayer. Some tears are only the ego refusing to release what is loved. This does not mean the poem is anti-grief. That would be weak reading. A childish reading. The poem is not saying a mother should not cry for her dead child. It is saying grief must be transformed. In Islam, mourning is allowed and the heart is allowed to ache, but grief is held inside sabr, patience, inside surrender to God. In Christianity, tears exist, even Jesus weeps. but grief is held inside resurrection. In Judaism, mourning is structured through ritual and sacred time because sorrow without form becomes chaos. The Abrahamic traditions understand grief deeply. They do not command emotional numbness, they command discipline of the soul. This poem belongs to the same spiritual logic. It does not condemn tears, it condemns tears that become a flood. And the flood belongs to the Great Mother. Neumann's Great Mother is often connected with water, night, earth, cave, blood, womb, and depth. These are the regions from which life comes, but also the regions into which life can disappear. The lamp, by contrast, belongs to fire, light, spirit, and consciousness, direction. So when the child reveals that his lamp has been extinguished by the mother's tears, the poem gives us an archetypical image of enormous force. Maternal water has drowned the child's spiritual fire. That is not sentimental, that is terrifying. The mother's love has become a dark womb for the child, and she has enclosed the child in her grief. The child has died once physically, but psychologically, she refuses to let him be born into the beyond. She keeps him inside the emotional chamber of her mourning. And so the poem asks the mother to perform the most painful act of motherhood, to give birth to the child a second time. Not into the world this time, but out of herself, out of her sorrow, out of her claim, out of her tears. That is the transformation from devouring mother to the releasing mother. This is also where Jung's concept of individuation becomes crucial. Individuation is the process by which the soul becomes whole, becomes itself, separates from the projections and demands placed upon it. In ordinary life, a child must separate from the mother to become a full person. That does not mean he stops loving her. It means love matures beyond fusion. But in this poem, death has created the most absolute separation possible, and still the mother's psyche refuses it. She cannot bear the child has a journey beyond her. So the child appears behind the other boys. He is slowed by her attachment. His unlit lamp is the image of arrested individuation. He cannot move fully into his own spiritual destiny because the mother grief still holds him in the maternal field. In Jungian terms, he remains caught in the mother complex, not because he chooses it, but because her psyche refuses to release the image of him. The real child is dead, but the psychic child is still trapped inside the mother's inner world. This is what makes the poem is so painful. The mother has confused memory with possession. To remember is human, to pray is sacred. To mourn is natural, but to bind the dead to your grief is something else. It is an unconscious form of control. It says, if I cannot have you alive, I will have you as sorrow. That is the dark underside of the Great Mother. She does not always devour by rage. Sometimes she devours by lamentation. Sometimes the mouth that swallows is made of tears. And then comes the final revelation. The child shows the lamp and says that her tears have extinguished it. This is not comfort, this is judgment. But it is not cruel judgment. It is healing judgment, the kind of truth that cuts because the wound cannot heal while the lie remains inside it. The mother entered the dream believing that her son's absence was not source of her suffering. She leaves the dream if she understands it, knowing that her suffering has become part of his burden. This is the reversal that gives the poem its power. At first, we think the child has left the mother. By the end, we realize the mother has not let the child go. That reversal is the structure of the poem. It begins in unconscious darkness. It moves into sacred procession. It reveals the abnormal child, the delayed child, the child with the extinguished lamp. It gives the mother space to speak her grief, and then it gives the dead child the authority to interpret that grief. Finally, it ends with the image that explains everything, the lamp put out by tears. The text does not show us the mother after the dream. It does not tell us whether she changes, that is deliberate. The poem ends at the moment of revelation because now the burden passes to the mother and also to us. The dream has spoken, the symbol has been shown, the lamp has been explained. What remains is the ethical task. Will she release him? Will she let the child join the procession? And will she allow his lamp to burn? That is why his poem stays in the mind. It takes something universally admired, a mother's grief. and shows its shadow. It does not mock the grief, it does not cheapen it, it honors it enough to purify it. The poem says, yes, the mother loves, yes, the loss is unbearable, yes, the tears are human, but love must not become a prison. Grief must not become a chain. Motherhood must not become an underworld from which the child can never escape. In Neumann's language, the great mother must move from the devouring form to the transformating form. She must stop being the darkness that encloses and become the ground that blesses departure. In Jung's language, the mother must withdraw her projection, confront the unconscious truth, and allow both herself and the child image with her to individuate. She must become more whole by accepting separation. And that is perhaps the most painful truth the poem offers. Sometimes love reaches its highest form, not by holding on, but by opening the hand. The child is already walking. The procession has already begun. The other lamps are burning. Only his is dark. And the dream says with terrible tenderness that the mother's tears have done this. So the mother must learn a new kind of love. A love that does not flood, a love that does not accuse, a love that does not turn memory into captivity. A love strong enough to suffer without making the beloved responsible for the suffering. A love that can pray instead of possess. And a love that can bless the dead without dragging them back into the darkness of the living. That is the final command of the poem. Do not stop loving. Do not forget the child. Free him. Let the lamp burn. So I guess I hope you guys like this video, and if you have any comments, please leave that in the comment section below, and see you in the next video.